KEF just announced the update to their new Q series, the line of speakers that sits just below the R11 META we reviewed and used as a reference speaker for almost 2 years. Now, KEF is one of those brands that rarely misses the mark when it comes to balancing good design and great sound, so there's a really good chance there will be something for everyone, no matter their budget or needs. Now, today we're going straight to the top of the new Q line with their largest tower, the Q11 META. So what's different about the Q tower of old, the Q950, and its replacement, the Q11 META? While the visual differences are kind of subtle, existing Q950 owners will probably notice the smaller drivers and cabinet. Now, before you write off the new Q thinking you're being shortchanged, this downsize hasn't resulted in a radically different response. In fact, the Q11 META has largely the same reported response of 44 Hz to 20 kHz as the older Q, with a typical in-room response going as low is 26 Hz. What else? Well, the old Q's 2.5-way design gets upgraded to a new 3-way design using a 3/4-inch vented aluminum dome tweeter with KEF's trademark tech, metamaterial absorption technology, or MAT. The Q11 META also has a 4-inch aluminum cone mid-range driver and 3 6.5-inch hybrid aluminum woofers. Now, the 5 drivers, rear port, and heavier cabinet combine to achieve the speaker's response while just keeping its overall size in check, which should benefit those who are tight on space. The 11's 89 dB sensitivity and 4 ohm impedance, which can dip as low as 3.2, will require a more capable receiver or amplifier for best results. We used the Sony 5000 ES for home theater duty and had no issues. Stereo integrated amps like the new Marantz 60N, Model M1, and separate systems anchored by Emotiva's Basics A2 also worked really well. Any one of these gets my recommendations for powering the Q11 META. Setting up a pair of 11s is simple enough, but I believe KEF missed an opportunity to see more of the R line's DNA trickle down to its updated series. Rather than using the R's existing metal feet, KEF mimicked their design using plastic. Now, once you've assembled and installed the feet, they provide for very good stabilization, but it would have been just kind of a really nice way to elevate the new line while also giving existing customers something really easy to point at when weighing their decision on whether or not to upgrade. Now, when it comes to placement, KEF recommends putting at least 9 inches between the back of the 11's cabinet and your room's front wall, with at least 20 inches resting between their outer edges and your side walls. According to the manual, the speaker should be placed 5 to 10 feet apart, with your listening position being equal to that same distance or maybe just a hair further, which honestly turned out to be really solid advice. Now, in our room, I placed the 11s a foot off of our fabric wall, 10 feet apart, with our listening position being 11 feet from the speaker's front baffles. This setup allowed us to maximize our living space in ways few tower speakers do, while also producing an incredibly impressive in-room response. In fact, from about 50 Hz to 20 kHz, the Q11 META tracked more or less in alignment with the costlier R11 META. The R11 META, it is a little more linear from top to bottom and has fewer peaks and dips here and there, but honestly, the Q is not far behind, at least in our room. One area where the Q appears to best the R11 META is in the bass. The Q11 META has a little bit more energy or presence despite the overall extension being pretty similar. While the Q had enough bass for me when listening to real-world content, those who prioritize those low bass notes, they might opt for a subwoofer to take the 11's overall performance to that next level, or to overcome unavoidable bass dips due to placement. Now, it has been almost 4 years since we reviewed the smaller tower from the previous Q line, the Q750. I know, time has flown. So I have far more recent experiences with the R11 METAs, which stayed with us for almost 2 years. So when I say as a stereo pair of speakers, the Q11 METAs are impressive, you know where I'm coming from. Now, before you let your emotions swing to one extreme or the other, hear me when I say the R11 META is still the better overall speaker, especially if your quest is for greater neutrality and control. But if the R11 META is a little too exacting at times, maybe even dull compared to other speakers you've heard in your travels, the Q11 META may be a better fit. And I say this because the Q11 META has hints of energy and character, specifically in the bass and lower mid-range, which gives it a broader and weightier tone than what you're going to find in the R11 METAs. Kick drums, double bass, and even some vocal ranges possess more body through the Qs than with the costlier Rs. The R11 META has greater focus and control through these same frequencies and, as a result, could be perceived as more detailed. For example, the kick drum on Perfect Circle's The Noose, it sounded deeper and larger through the Q11 Metas, though it was more physically defined with a greater sense of texture, air, and decay with the R11 Metas. But if we're comparing the KEF speakers to, say, the SVS Titans, it's not even close. The Titans have deeper and more impactful bass that approaches near subwoofer-like performance. Now, the gap between the KEF's R line and Q, it really narrows as soon as you focus in on the mid-range and treble performance. This is where, in my opinion, the Q11 is going to be neck and neck with the R11 and R3 Meta. To me, it's going to come down to that perception of control. The R11 and R3 Meta both have just a more composed and focused sound, no doubt, because of their better cabinet design and use of materials. For example, you're listening to Diana Krall. Through the Q11, she's going to be a little bit broader. Through the R11 or R3 Meta, she's going to focus in, get a little bit smaller, and as a result, she's just going to have better dimension, scale, and placement within that soundstage, especially between the speakers. But these are things that you don't always derive from measurements. So while the R3 and Q11 Meta graphs, they may look eerily similar, there is an audible difference between them and the Q11, but it's not one that I think rises to the level of being better than the next. They're just a little different. So it's totally possible that some of you may prefer the Q11's overall larger and just broader sound. These speakers easily fill a space and are a lot of fun the more you increase the volume. Vocalists from Diana Krall to Linkin Park's new bandmate Emily Armstrong, they sound more exciting through the Q11 Metas than the costlier R line. But is it better? Maybe. Maybe not, but it may be preferable. And if you prefer it, I don't have to tell you, you're going to save quite a bit by going with the Q11. As for the treble, the Q11 has a little bit more roll-off than the R11 and R3 Meta, but not by much. Even when playing back test tones or pink noise at higher frequencies, I had a real difficult time telling the timbres of the Q and the R3 Metas apart. Listening to real-world content, those differences were even harder to discern. In a perfect room with incredibly resolving gear, for example, something along the lines of Macintosh's MC312, a subtle difference and refinement may exist. However, the Q11 Meta gets so close to matching the R3 Meta's treble performance that the difference may not be audible in most rooms. Moving on to soundstage and dynamics, the Q11 Meta sounds larger and casts a larger perceivable stage, but the R line has better control and tighter focus of instruments and vocals within the soundstage, and that is something I believe folks are going to notice. But all that said, the Q11 is no slouch. The Q11 Meta's dynamics, they are more raw, with its costlier siblings trading some of that impact for just a greater sense of finesse. Switching gears to home theater, this is where the Q found another gear. We watched Deadpool and Wolverine through the Kaleidoscape Strato V connected to the Sony 5000 ES, and that opening scene, epic. And it was without a subwoofer. While the 11s may not have hit 20 hertz, I'm not sure anyone would have noticed. Even Christy thought our subwoofer was on. The Q11 Metas kick ass as left and right main channels in a home theater, and they blend seamlessly with the Q6 Meta Center. I actually enjoyed using the KEFs more for watching movies than to listening to music. The level of detail and placement of sound across the entire front of our room, along with their more raw dynamic punch, had me grinning ear to ear and wondering if we had just found a new, more budget-friendly benchmark for home theater. The Qs have just the right balance of neutrality and detail, which is that hint of character that makes them very enjoyable, whether you want to watch a big budget superhero flick or more theatrical like drama films such as Doubt or Primal Fear. Whatever you're watching, the best part is that as you turn things up to true commercial cinema levels, the new Q series speakers do not change in sound or response. Taking a side quest to discuss the KEF's new center, the Q6 Meta, it is terrific, and it was a perfect sonic match for the Q11 Metas, especially if you plan on using Room EQ software such as Dirac or similar programs. The center's intelligibility was very good, both on and off axis. All that said, even on their own without the Q6, the 11 center focus is good enough that I believe you could use them for home theater and rely on a phantom center. Now, if you've jumped ahead to hear about how the Q11 META compares to its costlier KEF siblings, the R3 and the R11 META, for shame, hit that rewind button and start this review from the top. For the too long, can't be bothered crowd, the R3 and R11 are superior products, especially if you prioritize the perception of detail and tighter focus at the expense of absolute bass extension and dynamic snap. But if you're okay forgoing absolute pinpoint accuracy and control, specifically in the lower mid-range and bass, save your money and shift your attention to the new Q META line. At roughly half the cost, the KEF Q11 METAs do not upset my SVS Titans. If you live and die by measurements, I could argue that the KEFs are the more neutral or accurate speaker. That said, the Titan's low-frequency extension goes deeper with greater energy and presence than just about any speaker this side of the $50,000 B&W 800 signature. So focusing on the SVS's mid-range and treble, the Titans have a character to them that I really like. If you prefer your speakers to be absolutely colorless, I would not be surprised if you prefer the more neutral KEF. As for me, I'm siding with the Titan's more full-range, coherent, and just contrasty sound. Directly A-Bing the KEFs and the Titan left no doubt that we made the right decision in making the SVS a reference speaker. I'm not suggesting that you will feel the same. Like with anything, go with what you like. Is the Titan perfect? No, but I firmly believe that if you respond to their sound, everything else just sounds dull and kind of lifeless by comparison. The almost 4-year-old POLK R700 still gets a recommendation from me. Deciding between the two, though, that may be a challenge, as these two speakers are very evenly matched. Now, the R700 has a greater sensation of weight throughout the low bass, but the Q11 META has more detail and snap down low in comparison, and this is something that can be heard, even with a receiver. The POLK is more likely to require a better amp or AVR, which could add to your overall investment. Now, its mid-range performance on the POLK, it may sound a little weightier due to the presence of more bass energy and weight, but honestly, both speakers are pretty dang neutral in this respect. The KEF's high frequencies, okay, these are not as rolled off as the POLK, so if you find the R700 too subdued, the Q11 META may be the answer to prayer. Dynamically, the KEF, it just has an easier time coming to life, which may save you money again when budgeting for an AVR or stereo amp. I didn't know what to expect when we first took delivery of the Q11 META. I mean, KEF as a brand has proven to be pretty consistent when it comes to designing quality loudspeakers that, just perform as advertised. But not in a million years would I have ever believed they'd allow their new Q line to come this close to the performance of their costlier R series. But they did. So that's it. That is now my take on the new Q11 META. Now it's time for you guys to tell me what you thought. What do you think of this new line? Great? Too close for comfort if you're an R owner? Or is this just an example of trickle-down technology making everything better at a lower price? Sound off. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And if I missed anything or there's a comparison you would like me to touch upon, go ahead, leave that in the comments, because you never know, could end up in next week's Unplugged. We're going to find out what Christy thought of the new Q series. Until then, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links Christy's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here, and both of us thank you all very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for me today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you Friday with a brand new Unplugged, and until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.